Hey everybody, it's Eric Pappenfuss. It's Friday, so it must be a buy day. And today we're going to talk about how books in the 17th, 18th, and 19th century sort of portrayed California's climate as a place where people would want to go to live and build homes. And as the wildfires recede and the difficult task of rebuilding begins, I thought people would find this story interesting. We also have a very interesting anecdote about the first ever individual to go door to door in California attempting to sell fire insurance.
Uh-oh.
So let's get right to it. This sounds really pretty neat. I want to begin, though, with a myth. And the reason we're going to begin with a myth is because in the 17th and 18th century, if you knew anything about California at all, you thought of California as an island. And that's because there was a great misperception in the early maps of the period and the early explorers that California, as it existed somewhere off the west coast of the United States, was actually an island. And an island with sort of mythical climate and almost utopian-like sensibilities of its inhabitants. Something like Atlantis or something mysterious. Amanda, and this was perpetuated again and again. So I have an example of a textbook. So if you were a founder in America or somebody in colonial America and you were learning about your country, you would learn about California as an island. This is a 1720s British textbook, but we have many, many other examples of this here at The Scholar. I like this because the two maps that it includes both clearly show the myth of California as an island. Oh, wow. So when they're discussing America, what do you see there, right? You see the Isle of California. Yeah. All right. And this is at the same time, you know, George Washington and others are getting born in the United States. This is the common thing. And then you can also see this in the globes of the period. I don't have an actual globe for you, but I do have a map of a globe. This is an example of the globes. And what do you see there for America? There you go. It's the Isle of California, this mythical place with the amazing climate where people will greet you and just you'll never want to leave. Now, there is a library in Stanford, California, which has over 1,000 maps from this period, the 17th and 18th century, all of which are different and all of which show California as an island. So that's really the initial history of how California creeps into people's imagination. By the 19th century, we know California isn't an island. People have actually been there and visited and charted it, and there are better maps. But this does go all the way through the 18th century. But in the 19th century, we start to have a number of people writing books that basically claim you got to come to California, not for the gold, but rather for the climate. The climate is what's going to soothe all of your respiratory ailments. And the first book to do this is here, and it's an absolutely fascinating book, Amanda. It is called The Mediterranean Shores of America, Southern California, Climatic, Physical, and Meteorological Conditions, written by a gentleman by the name of Peter Remendino. Now, Remendino's a very interesting character. He was a doctor, and he studied under Dr. Thomas Mutter at the Jefferson Medical College in Philly. If you haven't seen our By Day from the Mutter Museum, and you don't know anything about Thomas Mutter and his class, I hope you'll watch that By Day. But Remendino got his degree there, partnered with another doctor who worked with Mutter, and he was a surgeon in the American Civil War. And during the Civil War, he sort of served gallantly, but he developed malaria and a variety of other sort of physical maladies and complaints. He goes out to Southern California, Amanda, and what does he behold? He beholds sunshine, low humidity, beautiful winds coming across the ocean, an incredible climate, and he becomes convinced that this is the key to curing everyone's ailments. And he is the first person to write a book promoting California as basically a great health cure. He settles in San Diego. He forms the first hospital, and he writes this book, which is fascinating because, Amanda, it's sort of like half serious scientific physical meteorological study, right? With graphs and charts and measures of the humidity and the temperatures, but it is also sort of half tour guide with, pictures of the railroad and how you can go up to the mountains and go skiing and then go down to the, and it is this weird book.
Was he selling something?
He was selling California. This is the idea. The whole state of California. He wanted other people to benefit from it the way he did. He's the founder of the first hospital in San Diego. He does all sorts of great things, but this is the book which really says California's climate is the place to be. Now, this blog here, Buy Day Friday, is really about the book trade. So there is another interesting story that has to do with Peter Remendino, the man and his library, and we'll put the link to this interesting story below. But he amasses the largest collection of medical books at that time ever before heard of in California. After the Civil War, he spends time traveling in Europe. He buys all these 16th century anatomy books and all these great, wonderful medical textbooks. He crams 15,000 books into his little study in California. And you know what he decides to do? He decides he's going to give them to the San Diego Public Library for posterity because, you know, this will cement his legacy. All these people that are coming to California because he's told them to can now read his collection of medical books. He makes a small donation of books, Amanda, to get started, and then he starts cataloging, getting the rest of his books ready to donate. When he goes back to the library a few weeks later and he finds them on the sale cart, stamped discarded, and he is brokenhearted. And I find this so amusing because I was just at a book sale a couple months ago. I won't say where, but it was in Pennsylvania. And there was somebody at the book sale yelling at the organizer of the book sale saying, I donated these books to the library. Why are you selling them? And they were saying, well, we had copies. We didn't need them. This is how we support the library.
People don't realize there's so many books.
They don't realize, but he then immediately canceled his plans to donate them to the public library in San Diego, and he put a covenant on his collection of 15,000 books. He said, any university can have them, but you can never sell them or get rid of them. You have to keep them together. And did that work? No, it didn't work. Nobody wanted his collection of books. And this also happens today. You have people that have these great collections of books. They try and give them away. They can't do it. Eventually, a rare book dealer in San Diego helped him place some of the books in a local institution, and they're still there today, so you can read about Remendino and his library. We're going to end, though, with a story about fire insurance, because this book came in, and it is a remarkable, remarkable book. It's not a book about fire insurance. It is a book written by somebody who sold fire insurance by the name of Casper Hopkins, and he was the first American to sell fire insurance in California. Now, what makes this book really interesting is it's really about how to be a good American, and it has this fantastic chart. Just look at that amazing chart from just after the American Civil War that puts sort of, you know, liberty and equality in the center of the political ideas. I mean, just take a look at that, and you can do it.
No monopoly is very interesting.
Yes, no monopoly. Lots of interesting things. He puts. He also sent a copy of this, of all things, to Governor Chamberlain, who is the Union general who is famous for defending Little Round Top at Gettysburg. And, you know, he tries to get the word out. But Casper is particularly interesting because he's first been to sell insurance in California. This book note is actually published for the author in a very small amount in San Francisco, and he's gone out there to sell insurance. Now, I have to tell you briefly about the history of fire insurance, and you might find this interesting, but in colonial America, fire insurance was sort of the same thing as marine insurance or maritime insurance. You could get like Lloyd's of London to insure the costs of, you know, your cargo on a ship or maybe your house from fire. It was very complicated. It was sort of a one-off thing. In America, we eventually have mutual insurance. This is Benjamin Franklin's great idea in Philadelphia that happens in a few other states where homeowners sort of band together and they put money into a pool to buy insurance for their homes, and they work with local volunteer fire companies. And this came into the bookstore just the other day. This is an example of a fire plaque that you would place on your house if you bought your fire insurance so that the fire companies would know to save your house.
Right.
And you can see some of the problems with this type of mutual insurance. After in the early Republic in Jeffersonian America, we changed to joint stock companies, which are basically where investors are pooling their money to insure larger swaths of fire insurance. And you begin to see a center for this in Hartford, Connecticut, another center for this developing in Philadelphia. The problem with this is it's done basically state by state, Amanda. And if you have a big fire like you do in New York City in the 1830s, it's going to wipe out all the insurance companies that are based in the state. And it becomes clear by the time of the American Civil War that you really have to have geographical regional distribution in fire insurance if you're going to be able to be successful. And these companies, rather than just focusing state by state, start selling policies through brokers in all the different states. The thought being, well, you can't have a fire in Boston and Chicago at the same time, can you? Yes, you can, and we will not get into that. But there's a horrible fire later in the 19th century that wipes out the insurance companies again. At any rate, Casper Hopkins goes out to be a representative selling insurance in California so that it can be part of the geographical distribution with these insurance companies. He can get in on this, and he makes a fortune doing it. He also is the first to establish a sort of state regulation for fire insurance in California, which he does in the 1860s as well. And this is important because you can't just have anybody and his brother selling fire insurance. You gotta have some regulation to make sure the state making sure these companies are solvent, they have enough money to pay the policies, this sort of thing. And this is all done by Casper Hopkins, writer of the Manual of the Great American Ideas. I guess insurance being really at the center. We'll have to study that graph again. At any rate, ultimately, even that doesn't work. And you see that really the problems that we're experiencing today are that no insurance company, no matter how geographically diverse, can really sustain such a massive loss. And the only way that you're going to be able to deal with this in the future is probably through state regulation and a sort of state-backed system of fire insurance in which everybody pays. If you're committed to the California climate ideal, you have to be a part of the overall pool that pays the fire insurance. And we won't go on and on that. I will say that for Remendino, the key to the helmet was the ventilation and the winds, and that's the same thing which is causing issues with the wildfires, but it was also causing great positive effects for respiratory illness and everything else at the time.
Sure.
So that's our story for today. We're going to end with a funny book that seems very Californian. You let me know. We just had a bunch of cookbooks come into the Scholar, didn't we,
Yes,
Amanda?
we did.
And you took one on what was it?
The Berry Good.
Berry. Well, that's Berry Good, but this is even better than Berry Good. This is the Solar Food Dryer book, which I think is just a fantastic California book. And it's funny in part because basically you can do anything by just leaving it out in the sun. Here's an interesting fact that I read in the Solar Food Dryer book.
Okay.
Do you know that the best way to make orange juice is to slice your oranges in half? Your California oranges.
Of course.
You take them out, you leave them in the sun for a couple days, and then you squeeze them, and they become much sweeter, and they get imbued with the vitamins from the rind and everything else, and it becomes a much better orange juice. Have you ever tried that?
I do it in my fridge.
Well, you might want to try it, and you might want to get the Solar Food Dryer book to be able to try that and other things. And as electric prices continue to rise, this may be the future for food consumption in America. Well, that does it for another Buy Day. Thanks for watching. I hope you'll watch next Friday and every Friday at noon for more adventures in the world of books.